So I live in the province of British Columbia in Canada. And my family and I lived for about 6 years in the kind of territory that I'm going to paint. It's in the interior, it's between mountain ranges, I guess if you lived in Chile they would call it the Altiplano. It's plains, but at a higher altitude, although not as high as the plains in Chile, but I think between 3,000 and 4,000 feet-ish. And it's gorgeous territory. So what I'd like to do, a lot of people settled there, well over 100 years ago. Ranchers trying to raise cattle, some gold prospectors. It's got quite a history to it. What I'd like to capture though is a bit of an old remnants of an old homestead, maybe just an old shed or barn. You know how much I like those. And the hill behind it. The territory there is populated by a lot of pine, different types of pine, a lot of lodgepole pine. And as soon as spring is gone, because the soil is so sandy and there is bedrock underneath it, it drains and you have these golden grasses of sorts. So on a sort of cloudy day, you can get a certain effect to things, and I'm going to show you that as the painting develops. Right now I'm just going to lay in a bit of a sketch. So let's call this, I put a mark here as you can see, let's call this sort of the base of the hill. And let's see, our hillside. I don't want to get too rugged, but okay, let's think maybe for a moment that we have a line of pines along this ridge. Something sort of interesting. Okay, maybe that's a distant hill behind it. The plan is for this to be quite dark on top, and the sun is not shining on the top of this hill, but rather at the base of it and around a few structures, maybe some fencing. I'm not sure yet. And I think a fairly blue sky behind here. We have a blue sky against some gold down here. That's pretty complimentary stuff. I think that can work out well. Okay. Now, I would like some poplars at the bottom because I want some interesting colors, and our dominant line is going down or up, left to right. So let's say that there's some Lombardy poplars here maybe. Okay, at the base of the hill. And boy, I'm not sure I want it quite like that. I may want to zoom in on this hill because I may want a structure to be a little larger than just way off in the distance. You know, the sheds that I love so much. Lean-to, bit of fence, maybe an old shed back in there. right? Because, at the base of the hill there may be a creek behind there. So you get a lot of trees growing there. Make that a little bit bigger. I want to zoom in on this a little bit, I think. Okay, pretty loose stuff, as you can see. Alright, so we have our hillside coming down, our poplars coming down here. Maybe there's an indication of a slough or something a little bit closer, This might be some cattails or something. Don't know. I have no idea. Again, I'm just putting in some lines right now. It's a bit strong. I'm just going to wipe that off lightly. Okay, the shape of the hill, because that's pretty important. All right. Sorry about rush hour as usual. Light coming from the left. You're so forgiving about all the traffic. Far more forgiving than I am, because I'm standing here and it's really irritating sometimes. Anyway, you've heard me whine about that enough. I promise I'll stop. Let's say that if the light's coming from the left, or only barely, I don't want it to catch this hillside, because as I said, I want this dark. Maybe I shouldn't concern myself so much that it's coming from the left as I am about it's coming from above, maybe slightly to the left. So maybe this side of the hill, it's all going to be in shade up top, but some area has to be more in shade than others. So let's just do that, just as an experiment. As you know, this drawing is going to change a million times before it's done. And you have eroded patches in places. Okay, as a line, this helps to point down towards what'll be the focal area. Okay, just lines. And those lines may not be deciding necessarily different planes, but the general feel of where I'm going to make transitions of color to more intense, less intense, etc. Or values, rather, I suppose. Okay, I think that gives us a pretty good idea what's up. Okay. This may not be such a bad idea. But I did not want this flat area below this flat area. I wanted it to the right a little bit, because this is not so important, this flat area. We'll see, this might be quite dark. And I'm just going to lay this line in, because that may be another dark area in there. I don't know what it's going to be, but we'll see. know I'm laying a slew of lines in here again, and it probably appears a bit strange to you, but these are just sort of thoughts that I'm having as I place these lines on here. Kind of funny in a way. I'm thinking I wish I'd have put the poplars here now. No, you know, that's okay. We can work with that. I'm just going to try to make it a little bit more interesting now. Yeah, and I don't like this peak. Okay, so there's a bit of a ridge here. And behind that ridge, in this gully, there will be some trees growing. Okay, I hear my wife coming home, and that means she will have brought groceries. So I'm gonna go help her with that. But I think that's the gist of what we have. I like it. Blue sky. Dark toned down hilltop, some lighter yellows and oranges maybe in these poplars, and then again some red sheds, you know, and then something interesting I hope. Okay, talk to you soon. Groceries are in. So anyway, I laid a few lines in here again and erased a couple of others. That's more or less what we're looking at. Next, I will take that dark outliner, which will be again, this time I'll probably, because I have it on my palette, ultramarine blue. Ultramarine blue is always an ingredient that I use for washing in my dark lines. Sometimes it's burnt sienna. I don't have any burnt sienna on my palette, but I do have raw umber. So, raw umber and ultramarine blue it is. And when I draw that in, I will try to improve on the sketch a little bit, as always. Well, I got a question from Lauren in Ontario. And I'm not sure specifically what you're asking. Probably in general you're wondering about, well, he asked, how do I achieve crisp lines with my painting? Now, of course, that depends somewhat on what stage of the painting that you're at. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to illustrate to you the texture, the viscosity of my mixture of paint when I'm laying in my lines to sketch the painting in, or to to go over my charcoal lines. So I keep thinning it off with turpentine until it's thin enough that it will not run. So there is still some thickness to it. But if I go too much thinner than that, it'll run and it'll be transparent. So I don't want it transparent or translucent. I want it opaque, and I don't want it to run. It's kind of as though if you were to leave a dish of butter out in the sun in 80-degree weather. Yes, it melts, but it doesn't, it doesn't turn into water. Well, no, pretty much take the butter that you would pour over popcorn and make it a little thicker, and that's about the right consistency for laying in your lines there. Now, regarding when you're making the painting, okay, first of all, I suppose I should show you this brush up close. Let's see how to catch light, so you have some idea. Okay, see that? Like, you really don't see it. You really don't see through it. You can't see my finger too easily. It's covered it. So it's right at the border of running and becoming translucent, but still opaque. Okay, let me just lick my finger off, and I'll back the camera off. Yes, please don't lick your finger off. Okay. Here we go. I'll back up and start yammering again. Actually, let me just adjust the camera up a little bit. Old man reaching. Okay, I'm not old, but you know what I mean. Ouch. Old enough to whine. So, there are three sort of basic issues regarding getting a clean line. When you're working just with a raw canvas, some canvases, depends on which company they come from, and even within a certain producer or manufacturer of canvas, sometimes they're very toothy, sometimes they're not. I like them toothy, but not too toothy. I like to have a little bit of bite. So every time you put paint on that gessoed, pre-prepared canvas, you're taking a bit of the tooth out, because you're scrubbing it a little bit, you're wearing down a bit of the tooth, and you're filling in the small sort of almost microscopic areas with paint. So you're leveling out the surface. Once you've done that, the canvas already becomes smoother. If you're working on wood, it's much easier because you have no tooth. Regarding making a hard, crisp line on wood panel is quite easy. Okay, so that's one. The heavier the texture you're working with, the more difficult it will be to produce a hard line, a sharp line, a crisp line. Second to that, Lauren, you asked if I use nylon. I never touch nylon with oil paints. I stick entirely to boar's hair, natural brushes. They hold more paint. They're easier to control. They don't last as long as nylon, but I'm willing to sacrifice that because I just like the way they handle better. The larger your canvas, the larger brush you can use. But in this case, for the sake of illustration, normally I would probably go to a 6, but right now this brush is a 4, and it's a flat 4. But it's a long bristle flat, because you can also get short bristle flats. There's probably a fancy name for them, I don't know. But I use the long bristle flats. And that allows me to hold more paint, and it allows me to have a little more control over what I'm doing. So I haven't spent too much time thinking about exactly what I want here, but I'm just going to show you something briefly. Am I on? Yeah, okay, I'm on canvas, or I'm on camera. And sometimes I still have to go over a spot the odd time. It can be a bit sloppy, I'm not worried about it. Okay, now by feeling that on the canvas, I know that I can thin it off just a little bit more. And of course, the roofline cannot be cannot be straight and healthy. It has to be damaged and sagging and you know, all that stuff. It just has to be. I'm sorry, I just can't help myself. Alright, and I have to have a hole there because that's a shop or a barn or, you know, whatever. And I'm even going to paint that in. Okay. So number one is the texture of the canvas. Number two is your brush. And as I say, I use only natural hair for the actual painting. Boar's hair is stiff enough that it allows you to also become apply your paint in a more impasto manner. If you're painting and applying very thin layers, I would suggest that you don't just use a prepared canvas. If you do, you'll have to put several more coats of gesso on it and sand it between coats very lightly. Not going to get into that right now. That was number two. Number three. Oh yeah, you may have been talking about when once the painting is well underway, and I'm trying to lay in some sharp lines in areas against, you know, the outlines that I have, or, you know, light against dark or what have you. That really comes down to loading your brush. If you know, load your brush, not heavily so there's a glob on the end of it, but it's something you're going to have to feel out. You load enough paint into your brush so that you're able to butt up against something and push just a little bit and then draw away from it, or go right alongside a line. At that point, you know, like when I'm painting at that point, I'm not using any turpentine. There's no thinner. I'm going straight oil paint. Sometimes I'll add a little bit of linseed oil to my paint, depending on the technique that I'm using. But in general, I'm just making sure that my brush is not dry at all. And then I'm very carefully doing this. Now, in order to get a good clean line, you always need a brush that is not splayed. You need a fairly new brush. I'm going to grab a splayed one just to show you. Okay, see that? That brush is not in horrible shape. But the hairs on it are splayed enough that you won't get a good clean line. Here is a brush that will give you a very clean line. It's flat, it's a flat long hair that I've used very little. So if I need a really clean line, that's what I'll use. See that? It's very useful for that. And that's why you keep several brushes on hand. And I tend to reserve, like I wouldn't use this new square brush to wash in a whole painting, because I'll wear the bristles off and break so many bristles, it'll be useless after that. Brushes aren't cheap. So I reserve certain brushes for clean lines and for certain areas and for the final painting. Okay, I hope that helps. I hope that sort of approaches the answer that you were looking for. If not, please let me know. I will talk to you soon. I guess next time I'll actually do the drawing with my dark paints. Actually, I might do part of it tonight, but I'm gonna duck out on you, and I'll just do that on my own. Okay, thanks. Bye. Okay, well, I still had some paint, thinned off paint on my palette, so I just had to use it up. Anyway, that's where it sits tonight. Talk to you soon. Bye.